true terrifying horror stories are the ones that don't rely on monsters, curses, or dramatic twists. They're built out of ordinary routines. A drop-off at a quiet house, a knock during bad weather, a hallway you've walked past 100 times. The fear comes from the moment you realize you misread something basic. An open door that shouldn't be open. A voice that doesn't match the situation. Footsteps that appear where no one should be. They tend to end without neat closure, because real danger rarely announces itself, and real predators rarely explain what they wanted. The worst part is how normal everything looks right up until it isn't, and how close you can get to the wrong decision without even noticing. I didn't set out to collect stories like this. They just happened, spaced out over years, each one leaving behind the same aftertaste, the sense that you survived because you hesitated for one extra breath. The first time it happened to me, I was doing a late evening delivery during a cold snap. The kind of night where the air feels sharp, and every sound carries farther than it should. The neighborhood was quiet, driveways softened under fresh snow, porch lights glowing like small islands. I pulled up, switched on my hazards, and did the usual routine. Check the bag, check the address, walk up quickly so the cold doesn't bite through your clothes. Halfway up the driveway, I saw the front door. It wasn't wide open. It was cracked, just enough for a dark slice of interior to show, and enough for warm air to leak out into the cold like a slow exhale. Most people didn't leave doors like that in weather like this. If they did, it was because they were expecting someone. That thought should have made me more cautious, but it did the opposite. It made it feel normal. I told myself they cracked it so I could set the bag inside, out of the snow. When I reached the porch, I nudged the door with my knuckles. It gave easily, like it hadn't latched at all. I leaned in, kept my body outside, and slid the bag over the threshold. As I brought my phone up to take a confirmation photo, a woman's voice called from deeper in the house, bright and casual, like she'd been waiting. She asked if I was the delivery person. Her tone had that practiced friendliness people use when they're trying to make a stranger feel like they belong. I said yes, and that the order was right in the doorway. There was a pause that felt like someone deciding something. Then she told me I could come in and bring it to her, that she was just around the corner. The phrasing hit me wrong. People who don't want you in their house don't say come in. People who do want you in their house usually meet you at the door. I pushed the door a little wider, just enough to see. A long hallway stretched away, dimly lit by a single lamp somewhere out of sight. At the far end, a warm glow suggested a kitchen or living room. On the wall, near the end of the hall, there was the clean edge of a shadow, the kind you get when someone is standing near a corner under a lamp. It looked like the outline of a person's head and shoulders. I called out, asking where she wanted me to bring it. Another pause. Then she leaned out at the end of the hall, half her body visible. Young maybe, hair pulled back, wearing something casual. She smiled and waved me in with quick, impatient motions, as if it was silly for me to hover at the entrance. She ducked back out of sight. And that's when my brain finally processed what my eyes had been seeing. The shadow on the wall didn't shift when she moved. It stayed fixed, as if someone else was standing there, closer to the light source, holding perfectly still. For a second my body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I didn't think someone else is there, like it was a simple fact. I thought it like it was a trap closing. I set my phone down by my thigh so it didn't shine, and I placed my hand back on the door edge as gently as possible, trying to move without making a sound. I took one step backward, then another, keeping my eyes on the hallway. I expected the woman to call again, to ask what I was doing. I expected the shadow to move. Neither happened. That silence felt like someone holding their breath. I turned, walked fast down the steps, and the moment my boots hit the driveway, I broke into a run. I fumbled my keys, got into the car, and locked the door so hard my fingers hurt. As I pulled away, I looked back. In the front window, just inside the house, a larger figure crossed into view, slow and unhurried, as if they knew there was no need to chase. They stopped at the glass and watched my car leave, a dark shape against warm light. I drove until I hit a brighter road, then pulled into a gas station and sat under the canopy lights, hands shaking over the steering wheel. I told myself to call the police, but the story sounded unreal even in my head. A door cracked open. A woman's voice. A shadow that didn't match. What would I even report? Suspicion. Vibes. Instinct. I called anyway. When officers went out later, I was told the woman said she had no idea what I was talking about, and she refused to let anyone come inside. Without consent, without clear evidence, it went nowhere. The bag was gone by morning, of course. The app showed it as delivered, which was true in the most technical sense. That wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was how smoothly it had been staged, how normal it would have looked if I'd taken one more step, how the warm light and polite voice were meant to override the small alarm bell in my chest. For weeks afterward, every time I saw a door not quite closed, I felt my stomach tighten. The next story happened after I started working from home, when the weather turned bad and the streets stayed half-plowed for days. I was alone in a rental house that felt too big when the rooms were empty. My spare bedroom had become my office. I was on a call when there was a knock at the front door. 2 taps, then another, patient but insistent. I muted my microphone, walked to the entryway, and looked through the peephole. A man stood on the porch in a heavy jacket, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. He didn't look like a delivery driver. He looked like he belonged anywhere. That's what made it harder. When I opened the door a crack, wind shoved snowflakes inside like it was trying to get in too. The man apologized for bothering me and said his vehicle had slid into the snowbank just down the street. He said he didn't have his phone and asked if he could use mine to call someone. The request was reasonable enough to be dangerous because it forced me to either be the paranoid person who refuses a stranded stranger in bad weather or the helpful person who ignores the warning signs. I told him to wait. I shut the door, walked to a side window, and looked out toward the road he pointed at. There was a vehicle there, angled wrong, tires half buried. So the story checked out. I still didn't like the way he'd asked to use my phone instead of asking me to call for him. But I talked myself into a compromise. I put on my coat, stepped outside, and kept the door mostly closed behind me so he couldn't see inside. I held the phone in my hand and asked for the number. He gave it, and when I dialed, he took the phone from me without asking, like we were already familiar. He turned his body slightly away, shielding the screen, and spoke low. It was a quick call. He handed my phone back, thanked me, and walked toward his vehicle. I watched through the window as he got inside. I went back to work. Hours later, after dark, I remembered him and looked out again. The vehicle was still there. A shape moved inside it, shifting from seat to seat like someone restless. I told myself maybe whoever he called hadn't come yet. Maybe they were stuck too. I went about my evening, made food, tried to relax. Later, when I went upstairs, I turned on the shower. The sound of running water made the house feel sealed off, and that's why the banging on the front door jolted me so badly. It wasn't a polite knock. It was repeated impacts, hard enough to make the door shudder in its frame. I froze under the spray, heart punching against my ribs, listening as the banging turned into the violent rattle of someone yanking the handle. It didn't sound like someone needing help. It sounded like someone trying to get in fast. I shut off the water, threw on clothes with shaking hands, and stepped into the hallway. The moment I did, the noise stopped. Silence dropped over the house like a blanket. I stood still, listening for footsteps on the porch. Nothing. I moved down the stairs slowly, every step feeling too loud. When I reached the door, I didn't open it. I went to the front window and looked out. The porch was empty. The vehicle down the street was still there, but the interior light was off, and I couldn't see anyone. I called the police and stayed in the kitchen with all the lights on, until they arrived. Outside, the officers found multiple sets of footprints layered into the snow, as if more than one person had been moving around the front of my house. The wind was already softening the edges, but you could still see the paths, from the street to my porch, from my porch to the side of the house, back again. The vehicle's plate led to an owner whose photo matched the man I'd spoken to earlier. They waited, checked the area, came back later. The vehicle was gone by morning. No tow marks, no note, no explanation. People tried to reassure me afterward by suggesting he was being chased and needed shelter. That the banging was desperation, not malice. Maybe, but desperation doesn't explain why he waited for hours in a car outside my house. Why he took my phone and turned away. why there were multiple sets of prints, why the banging stopped the instant I left the shower, like whoever was outside heard a change in the house and decided to vanish. The last story is the one that still gets to me, because it happened in a place designed to feel safe. I was traveling alone during a storm and stopped at a roadside motel because visibility had dropped and the roads were emptying out. The parking lot was crowded when I arrived and nearly empty later, as if everyone had either pushed on or given up and left. My room was the kind that faced the lot, door directly to the outside, a thin curtain over a window that never quite closed. I checked in, went inside, and did what people always do in unfamiliar rooms. I scanned quickly, told myself it was fine, and tried to sleep. At some point I woke abruptly, the way you do when something changes in the environment. The air felt colder. I sat up and heard wind that sounded too close, like it was inside the room. I looked toward the window. It was cracked open, just a small gap, but enough for the storm to push in a steady stream of cold air. I was sure I'd closed it. I got up and latched it, hands numb against the glass. Then I looked at the door and felt my stomach drop. The deadbolt wasn't set. The latch lock wasn't set either. Both were unlocked, and the only way that could happen was if someone had turned them from inside the room. I didn't move for a second. My mind tried to create benign explanations. Maybe I forgot. Maybe the lock was faulty. But my body didn't believe them. I backed away from the door, grabbed my bag, and started putting things inside without taking my eyes off the handle. I didn't want to call out. I didn't want to make noise. The room felt suddenly too large and too quiet, like it was waiting. Then the door handle twitched. Once. Twice. Someone on the other side testing it gently. Not like they were lost, but like they were confirming what they'd already set up. I stood frozen. Phone in my hand, not even sure what number I'd dial. The handle went still. A long, unbearable pause followed, and then I saw a shadow slide across the thin strip of light under the door, as if someone leaned in close. I crept to the peephole and looked. A man stood pressed near the door, head angled as if listening. He wasn't facing the lot. He was facing my room like it was the only thing in the world. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. After a moment he moved away quickly, footsteps fading across the concrete. I didn't wait to understand why. I pulled the door open and stepped out into the cold, not caring if it was a mistake, because staying felt worse. The lot was nearly empty, snow cutting sideways through the lights. I moved fast to my car, got in, locked everything, and drove until I found a place that was open and bright and had people inside. I sat there until my hands stopped shaking. The next morning I returned in daylight, with the sun reflecting off old snow like broken glass. The motel clock said no one had accessed my room, no one had a spare key out, no one had reported anything. But when I looked at the window, there were faint smears on the outside frame where someone could have pushed it open without leaving a clean fingerprint. And the thing I couldn't stop thinking about was the order of events. The window opened first, to wake me or to change the room's temperature. Then the locks found open. Then the handle tested, as if whoever it was assumed I'd still be asleep and wanted to check if the work was done. That pattern is what makes these stories terrifying. Not the storm, not the shadows, not the noise. It's the sense of planning underneath the surface, the way danger can wear normal voices and polite requests and quiet movements. And it's the knowledge that in each case the difference between a story you tell and a story that ends differently was a single choice you almost didn't make.